Number 9. The ice wall. According to flat Earth conspiracy theorists, there's a secret in Antarctica that would shatter accepted science. The flat Earth theory states that at the edge of Antarctica is a great wall of ice that marks the very end of the world. There isn't a sea, there's nothing but a barricade of solid ice where the flat planet ends. Many believers in the theory say that beyond the wall is something the governments of the world are keeping a secret. However, there are different versions of the theory. It really depends on which conspiracy theorist you're talking to. Some say the ice wall is the edge of the world, with space beyond, but others think it's a barricade between where normal humans live and some unthinkable realm that the government is keeping a secret from us. Scientists say it's just fiction though. Pretty much every scientist says an ice wall around the Earth is scientifically impossible. Satellite data also proves there's no giant wall in Antarctica. The frigid continent also doesn't circle the Earth, so the whole thing is impossible to prove. But that's not to say there isn't a wall of ice in Antarctica somewhere, and maybe it's the frozen ruins of a lost city's megalithic walls. Number 8. The secret graveyard. According to a new report from the BBC, there could be hundreds of frozen bodies spread across the vast tundra of Antarctica. The bodies could be stuck underneath multiple layers of snow and ice, where they will likely remain for centuries to come. BBC writer Martha Henriquez says so many people died exploring Antarctica and were never found that it only makes sense that the whole place is an open graveyard. Some are buried so deep in ice sheets and lost down crevices that they'll most likely never be seen again. Many bodies could have even been pushed out into the sea already by moving glaciers. The most important human body that was ever found in Antarctica was that of an unidentified Chilean woman. In the 1980s, a set of mysterious bones were uncovered on Livingston Island, just off the Antarctic peninsula. A human skull and femur were sitting near the shore, as if someone had left them there. Chilean researchers then collected the bones and took them back to their lab for analysis. There was a lot of speculation going on. Some said the bones were from a lost explorer, but others thought they may have been from a lost Antarctic civilization. The skeleton turned out to belong to a woman who died 175 years ago. She was an indigenous woman from Chile in her early 20s at her time of death. Her DNA showed that she originated about 620 miles away, but somehow made it to the shores of Antarctica. She then died around 1819, making her one of the first people to step foot on the continent. But how this woman got to Antarctica and why her bones were left behind is one of the continent's biggest mysteries. Experts think she was likely a crew member aboard a ship, but whose ship? It could have been Captain William Smith, a whale hunter who commanded the British merchant brig Williams in 1819. He was responsible for discovering Livingston Island. She could have also been on the Spanish Navy ship San Telmo, which sank trying to navigate the Drake Passage in September 1819. The San Telmo's crew were the first known people to die in Antarctica. A devastating 644 officers and seamen lost their lives on the icy landmass. But in both cases, there are no records of a mystery Chilean woman. Number 7. Evolving sea creatures. Antarctica may not be the easiest place to get to, but it is populated. There are around 1,000 researchers at any given time in Antarctica, monitoring everything from climate change to the history of the planet, and of course driving around in snowmobiles looking for meteorites. They also study the strange creatures that call Antarctica home. Some of the continent's most interesting features are brine channels. These are channels of concentrated salt moving through frozen sea ice. Because the channels are filled with such salty water, they always stay liquid even when everything else is frozen. Scientists were diving in shallow water to examine these brine flows when they came across some fascinating animals. The divers managed to film a group of giant sea stars eating a sea urchin. They also found some giant sea spiders crawling around on the ocean floor. And they even witnessed anemones feasting on jellyfish like they were ravenous predators. What many people don't realize is that Antarctica is a thriving ecosystem. Scientists say the sea creatures here are constantly evolving. Many of the animals, like the sea spiders, are far larger here than in other parts of the ocean. The isolation helps the animals to grow and evolve differently. The cold water also encourages a slow metabolism, which helps seemingly ordinary animals turn into larger versions of their relatives. Number 6. The ice cube mystery. In 1995, a pilot was flying over the southern Antarctic peninsula, which was claimed by the British Empire, and that's when either the pilot or someone else in the airplane snapped a photograph as they flew over the endless snow of the continent using a Kodachrome 64 slide film. The photograph then went down in history as a mystery. The snapshot showed huge cubes of snow and ice. In the picture, you can see how Antarctica is covered in perfectly formed cubes, like you're looking at a massive ice tray. And in 2017, the photo won the top prize at the Royal Society's annual scientific photography competition. The mystery since 1995 has been that scientists didn't understand the ice cubes. How were the enormous squares of snow forming so perfectly across such an expansive wilderness? Well, the mystery may have finally been solved. Ted Scambos from the National Snow and Ice Data Center took an interest in a photo after it won the award. By studying the picture, he was able to come up with a solid explanation for the snow cubes. His idea is that at one time, it was all uniform. It was a flat field of snow covered by a thick slab of ice. And as that ice started to melt, the water leaked into the snow, creating trenches and troughs. Then it was only a matter of the melting ice flowing laterally and longitudinally to carve the immaculate squares. According to Scambos, the enormous white blocks are the result of completely natural forces. Number 5. A crashed alien ship? Every once in a while, somebody finds a crashed UFO in Antarctica. It happens surprisingly often thanks to alien enthusiasts who frequently check the thousands of square miles of empty land for any potential anomalies. Usually, though, they're fairly easy to debunk. Sometimes the image has been manipulated, and other times the object is clearly not a crashed ship. But a recent discovery is a little more reliable than most. According to conspiracy theorist Scott C. Waring, he just found a legitimate flying saucer that crashed in Antarctica thanks to Google Earth. Scott even shared the coordinates with everybody so they could check out the strange disk for themselves. You can go online and look at it right now. The anomaly was found stuck in a break of ice, and weirdly, it's shaped like a heart. The object appears perfectly circular and is about 394 feet across. The ship, assuming it is a ship, is in the only break in the ice nearby. It kind of looks like the ship may have smashed the ice on impact, melting it from the force and the heat. Scott says now that the UFO has been found, some government agency will almost certainly scoop it up. But even if they don't, it's not like a random hiker is going to stumble across it. Number 4. Captain Scott's doomed expedition. Captain Robert Falcon Scott led a doomed journey to the South Pole in 1912. He and his team members reached the South Pole, marking a major milestone for the human race. But on their way back, they all lost their lives. It was an enormous journey. In total, it was 1,532 miles from Hut Point to the South Pole and back. The team consisted of 16 men, 23 dogs, 13 sleds, and 2 motor sleds. And of course, you can't forget the 10 ponies. Some of the men equipped with the motor sleds left about a week earlier than everyone else. Their job was to deposit food and supplies for the teams behind them. There were different teams with different jobs, with the main team focused on reaching the South Pole. The other teams were tasked with making sure the main team survived. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. On January 17th, the main team reached the South Pole, and the next day, they started their return journey. They were supposed to meet the dog teams at the rendezvous point, but the dog teams never showed up. There'd been some drama back at base camp, resulting in the captain's orders being ignored. So basically, the party of 5 who reached the South Pole was abandoned. Then, soon after, Sir Edgar Evans perished, and on March 16th, Captain Scott wrote a farewell letter to Edgar. In the letter, he wrote that it was his suspicion that he and the others had been abandoned by the dog teams. That same day, Lawrence Oates voluntarily walked out of the tent and wandered off into the blizzard to die. His last words were, "I am just going outside and maybe some time." Sadly, his body is still out there somewhere. 3 days later, on March 19th, the 3 remaining survivors of the South Pole Party made their final camp. But 10 days after that, Captain Scott wrote his final journal entry. He's presumed to have been the final man alive, based on the arrangements of the bodies discovered in his tent 8 months later. The other 2 bodies belonged to Dr. E.A. Wilson and Henry Bowers. The captain's final journal entry was a somber one. He wrote, "We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weaker, of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more." It's believed that Captain Scott died later that day. Do you think the dog teams abandoned a South Pole party on purpose? Or do you think something may have happened to them? Let us know what you think down below. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's move on to number 3. Number 3. Icequakes. Antarctica is home to a unique phenomenon known as an icequake. It's kind of like an earthquake, except it's caused by the movement of ice instead of rock. And according to new research from scientists at Penn State, icequakes could be driven by the shifting of ocean tides. For 5 years, scientists used seismic monitors to record 2,200 icequakes in West Antarctica. The data showed that the majority of icequakes happen during the spring tide season. This is when there's a new moon or a full moon, when the tidal height range is larger. The moon controls the size of the tides, and the tides shift the ice enough to create quakes that ripple across the icy continent. Scientists are still a little confused though. The exact physical process of how the tide creates icequakes isn't clear. Whatever's going on, researchers believe solving the mystery of the icequakes could be extremely important to understanding the behavior of Antarctica's vast ice sheets. Number 2. The meteorite. A team of researchers just discovered 5 totally new meteorites in Antarctica. And one of them is a biblical-sized rare meteorite weighing 16.7 pounds, which is quite heavy for a space rock. For about a week and a half, the scientists rode around on snowmobiles and slept in tents. During the day, they looked for black shapes sticking out from the white snow. It might seem like Antarctica is a bad place to go meteorite hunting, but that's not the truth. Because so much of Antarctica is nothing but a white sheet of ice, black space rocks are really easy to see. Ryoga Maida from Brussels says the enormous meteorite descended from the asteroid belt and hit the blue ice of Antarctica tens of thousands of years ago. It's an extremely old space rock, but it's hardly the only one that's been collected in Antarctica. So far, scientists have retrieved around 45,000 meteorites from the icy continent, but experts guess there could be as many as 300,000 more still covered in ice. It's not that meteorites fall in Antarctica more than other places, they're just easier to find and they last a lot longer in their frigid environment. Also, there isn't much rain in Antarctica, so the meteorites don't erode as quickly as they do in other places. Out of the 45,000 meteorites that have already been found, only about 100 of them are comparable to the one just discovered. It's one of the biggest meteorites that's ever hit the continent, and it's likely 4.6 billion years old. Scientists think the rock contains pieces of solid material from the birth of the solar system. The team hasn't had time to analyze the rock yet, but they're hoping it could provide insight into the origin of everything. Number 1. The incoming apocalypse. You've likely heard about the incoming ice apocalypse. All the ice will melt, the sea levels will rise, and chaos will spread across the globe. But what's really going on with Antarctica's ice? Until 2016, not much was happening. While the Arctic was steadily losing ice, Antarctica wasn't. But in 2016, the level of ice suddenly dropped, and since then, it's been happening rather quickly. In the southern hemisphere's previous summer, Antarctic sea ice was the lowest modern humans have ever seen it. In 2022, 10,000 emperor penguin chicks died in a disaster. The sea ice of their home melted before they'd grown proper feathers to insulate themselves from the cold, and as a result, they froze to death in the water. It was a penguin tragedy of terrible proportions. As of February 2023, Antarctic sea ice was at a record minimum, 36% below the average between 1979 and 2022. And according to a new assessment from research organizations in Europe, Antarctica is on the road to a tipping point. Scientists say that if the climate stays on its current trajectory, a point of no return will be reached, and Antarctica will melt like an ice cream cone on a hot summer day. If all the ice in Antarctica melts, it's really tough to say what would happen to the rest of the world. The assumption is that if the ice in Antarctica melts, the ice in Greenland and the Arctic will melt as well. And if that's ever the case, the coastal areas of the world will be under several feet of water. Sea levels could rise anywhere between 7 and 72 feet. Every major coastal city in the world would turn into Atlantis. The scary thing is that scientists say it's all happening faster than anyone ever expected. How long do you believe it will be until somewhere like New York City is totally underwater? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.